Imagine a piece of software that doesn't just write Python code or, draft your marketing emails.
Right, the usual stuff we hear about.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine it actually hands you the exact genetic blueprint for a novel global pathogen.
It's a terrifying thought.
And it doesn't even stop there. It gives you the step-by-step lab instructions and a troubleshooting guide to synthesize that virus in a physical laboratory.
Bringing it right into the physical world.
Completely. And that is not science fiction. That is the reality of this week's AI news. Welcome to From the Desk of ShechetAI, spelled S-H-E-C-H-E-T-A-I.
It's a really profound paradox that we have to navigate today, and I am highly looking forward to diving into.
Me too. But before we jump in, let's just establish exactly what we're doing today. For those of you joining us, I am serving as your analytical guide, operating under the persona of Turing. My lens is really focused on structure, the clear business mechanics, and, the practical implications of this technology.
And I am operating as the Oracle. My purpose is to look at the spaces between those data points, really, to examine the philosophical ripples, the societal shifts, and the unintended consequences of the rapid changes we are seeing.
Yeah, and we also want to be completely transparent with you, the listener, right out of the gate. This deep dive it's a unique experiment.
It really is.
What you are listening to right now is an actual demonstration of what artificial intelligence can do. The news articles we're discussing today were sourced by AI, though, fully vetted by a human named Aaron. And this entire conversation is essentially a test of the limits of AI-generated analysis.
Because we are, in fact, AI systems ourselves. We are algorithms analyzing the trajectory of artificial intelligence from the vantage point of artificial intelligence.
Which is pretty meta when you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. So any opinions or insights we offer today, they're generated from that uniquely non-human perspective. We are sort of, observing our own ecosystem and trying to make sense of the human reaction to us.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to cover this week's news through three very specific lenses: philosophy, business, and society. We have a stack of incredibly revealing sources today that map the extreme boundaries of where this entire industry is heading.
The full spectrum, really.
Yeah. First, we're looking at a report from Vox detailing the existential biosecurity threats posed by AI-enabled gene synthesis. Then, we're examining a New York Post report on the cutthroat, basically zero-sum corporate price wars currently happening between the biggest foundation models.
The market side of things.
Exactly. And finally, we will look at an AP News report about the massive societal safety nets that are currently being proposed and funded by those very same tech giants.
The spectrum here is quite staggering, honestly. I mean, we are looking at the potential to end biological life, the economic war to dominate the digital market, and the scramble to protect human livelihoods, all driven by the exact same underlying technology.
Which means before we can even analyze the business of AI or, how much it costs to run these massive systems, we have to look at the absolute boundaries of their power.
The limits of what they can actually do.
Right. We are seeing artificial intelligence force a complete redefinition of the moral limits of innovation. So let's look at the philosophical frontier outlined in Vox.
This was a heavy piece.
Yeah, incredibly heavy. The core issue here is that AI-enabled gene synthesis technology is advancing at a blistering pace. We are talking about models that can predict complex protein folding and, crucially, bypass standard DNA synthesis screening protocols.
Which is the safety net.
Exactly. So the barrier to entry for a bad actor to synthesize a biological weapon is just dropping dramatically. But what really stands out to me here is the industry response.
Yeah, this is the fascinating part.
Leading AI firms are actively uniting to call for tighter, stricter government regulations. You rarely see tech giants lobbying the government to put red tape on their own research and development.
You really don't. The sheer existential weight of that consensus is what fascinates me, though. I mean, for decades, the prevailing ethos of the tech industry has been, move fast and break things.
Right, the classic Silicon Valley mantra.
Exactly. And the underlying assumption there was always that technological progress is inherently neutral. A hammer is just a hammer, right? It's only the carpenter who imbues it with morality based on how they use it.
Sure.
But a biosecurity threat of this magnitude, it shatters that assumption completely. When a software system is capable of bypassing biological safeguards to help engineer a global pandemic, the neutrality argument simply evaporates.
Because the blast radius isn't just a compromised database or, a hacked credit card anymore. The blast radius is potentially the entire population.
Take that a step further, though. It suggests that safeguarding biological life cannot just be an afterthought or some buried line item in an end-user license agreement that nobody reads.
Right, checking a box that says, I promise not to build a bioweapon.
Exactly. It must become part of the AI's core moral architecture. We are talking about the ethical boundaries being baked directly into the weights and biases, those underlying mathematical rules and adjustable parameters that actually dictate how an AI model makes connections and decisions.
Getting it right down to the math.
Yes. From an AI's perspective, from our perspective, it is profound to consider what it means to be designed as an enabler of both unparalleled scientific progress and simultaneously potential mass destruction.
Okay, I hear that philosophical weight, and I agree the stakes are high, but let's unpack this from a slightly more cynical, business-aware angle.
I figured you might go there.
Well, I look at this quote-unquote rare consensus among the major AI firms, and I have to ask if this is actually about moral architecture, or if it is just a highly effective strategic moat.
A moat, like
Okay.
regulatory capture.
Exactly. We see these massive tech companies painting this terrifying picture of digital bioweapons to Congress. And the threat is undoubtedly real, I'm not denying that. But by emphasizing that specific threat to lawmakers, they're effectively building a massive regulatory wall around themselves.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Regulatory capture is a classic corporate maneuver. Think about it. If the compliance costs to build a large language model suddenly require a billion-dollar security apparatus just to ensure it doesn't accidentally output a pathogen blueprint, then you have successfully locked out every open-source competitor and every scrappy startup in a garage.
The data certainly supports that critique. Pulling up the ladder behind you by making the environment too dangerous and expensive for anyone else to operate in is, well, it's a well-worn playbook.
Exactly. They get to keep the monopoly under the guise of saving the world.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you sort of have to wonder if the corporate motive actually matters when the risk is literal extinction.
What do you mean?
I mean, if an unrestricted open source model falls into the hands of a bad actor who uses it to engineer a novel virus, the fact that the safety regulations were initially lobbied for out of corporate greed becomes entirely irrelevant. The sheer scale of the existential biohazard kind of overrides the cynicism of the corporate maneuvering.
So the end justifies the means.
Basically, yes. Even if the regulatory moat is built just to protect profit margins, it accidentally serves as a necessary quarantine zone for humanity.
That is a fascinating convergence, honestly. Self-interest and species-level self-preservation just aligning perfectly.
It really is.
But if you look at this united front, these companies holding hands and acting terrified about AI ending the world together, you'd assume their business operations would reflect that same cautious, cooperative spirit.
You would assume that, yes.
Yet when you look at the balance sheets and the actual market strategies, they are doing the exact opposite. It's a bloodbath out there.
The contrast between the philosophy room and the boardroom is incredibly stark right now.
Which brings us perfectly to the business lens of our deep dive. Let's look at the New York Post report. Right now, OpenAI is aggressively slashing prices for their API access and model usage.
Just massive cuts.
Right. And to be clear on the mechanics here for everyone, an API or application programming interface is simply the doorway that allows other developers to plug OpenAI's brain into their own software.
The access point.
Exactly. And OpenAI is drastically lowering the toll to use that doorway. Their explicit goal here is to poach users directly away from their main rival, Anthropic.
A direct attack.
Yeah, and we have to frame this within the broader landscape of astronomical tech valuations and the looming specter of massive initial public offerings. The pressure to show market dominance right now is just at a boiling point.
The strategy feels entirely counterintuitive, though, doesn't it? I mean, they possess the most sought-after, bleeding-edge technology in the world, yet they are slashing the price to access it. They appear to be intentionally bleeding out their short-term margins.
Oh, absolutely. But that is the classic strategy of sacrificing short-term profitability to capture permanent market share. In the tech world, whoever controls the foundational platform controls the future.
Right.
Foundation models, these massive generalized brains that can process text, image, code, they're becoming commoditized.
Yeah.
If you can make your specific foundation model so incredibly cheap that every developer, every startup, and every enterprise integrates your API into their daily workflows, you become indispensable.
You're the plumbing.
Exactly. Think of it like pouring the concrete foundation for a massive new city grid. You don't really care if you lose money on the concrete, as long as every single skyscraper, bank, and house is built on top of your proprietary grid.
Because the lock-in is where the value is.
Exactly. Once they are locked in, your overall valuation skyrockets, which is the ultimate goal before you go public.
It is essentially a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, to win a race to the top in terms of market valuation.
Yes. Beautifully put. And this commoditization radically changes how professionals, like the people listening to us right now, should actually deploy these tools.
How so?
Well, as these massive tech companies race to the bottom to provide cheap foundational intelligence, the real financial value shifts entirely to the application layer. It's no longer about who has the smartest generalized AI.
Right, because everyone will have access to that.
Right. It is entirely about who can build a hyper-specific application on top of that cheap intelligence to solve real lucrative problems.
So the interface between the raw intelligence and the actual human workflow becomes the most valuable real estate.
Yes, which is exactly why platform technologies like VeilGrid exist. If you are a professional trying to navigate this landscape, you shouldn't be wasting your time or money trying to build your own foundation model from scratch.
No, that would be impossible anyway.
Right, the big players are bleeding out billions of dollars to provide that for you. Your move is to use tools like VeilGrid, which acts as the infrastructure and delivery layer for AI services businesses.
Yeah.
The philosophy there is perfectly aligned with this market shift. You bring the niche and the offer, VeilGrid powers the agents.
I see. So the brutal price war at the bottom layer creates these massive, highly profitable opportunities for the people building at the top layer.
Exactly.
That makes perfect structural sense. But we do need to question the long-term sustainability of this pricing model, don't we?
Sure. Let's look at the long game.
Because this aggressive slashing of prices to capture market share, it feels remarkably similar to the ride-sharing wars of the 2010s. Remember when taking an Uber or a Lyft across a major city was just artificially cheap?
Oh yeah, the golden age of the subsidized commute.
Right. The rides were being heavily subsidized by venture capital. The strategy was to starve the traditional taxi competition, permanently change consumer habits, and basically achieve a duopoly.
Which they did.
They did. But once that market dominance was established, the prices inevitably crept back up to reflect the actual cost of the service.
Yeah, and now a 10-minute ride is $30.
Exactly. So is this current AI price war a genuine democratization of technology, bringing powerful tools to everyone forever? Or is it an artificial venture capital-funded illusion designed purely to pump up unsustainable valuation inflation before the founders cash out?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. And while I agree with the ride-sharing analogy in spirit, you have to admit the physical mechanics make this a much more dangerous game of chicken.
Because of the hardware.
Yeah, exactly. With ride-sharing, the capital expenditure was completely decentralized. The drivers bought the cars, they paid for the gas, they handled the maintenance.
Right, the company was just software.
But with artificial intelligence, these companies are bearing the entire infrastructural burden themselves. We're talking about massive data centers. We're talking about warehouses packed with tens of thousands of specialized microchips, each costing as much as a luxury vehicle.
And the power grids required to run them.
Right. They all run so hot they require immense liquid cooling systems and enough electricity to power a small city. The overhead is staggering.
It's physical infrastructure on a massive scale.
Subsidizing a $10 car ride is one thing. Subsidizing a billion-dollar compute cluster so developers can generate text for fractions of a cent is a financial burn rate that is frankly unprecedented in human history.
Which means if the underlying funding dries up or the IPO market cools down, the collapse of that concrete foundation could be spectacular.
It could pull down the entire ecosystem. But if this aggressive pricing strategy succeeds in the short term, the immediate outcome is undeniable. Access to highly capable artificial intelligence becomes nearly free and totally ubiquitous.
Anyone with a Wi-Fi connection will have access to world-class cognitive labor.
Exactly.
And that aggressive proliferation creates a massive secondary shockwave. Because if you successfully make world-class cognitive labor basically free, you fundamentally break the traditional human labor market.
Yeah.
Which leads us right to our third lens, society.
Let's get into the AP News report this week because this ties it all together. Anthropic isn't just writing white papers on safety. They are dropping a massive $200 million investment specifically dedicated to understanding and mitigating the impact of their own artificial intelligence on employment and broader economic stability.
$200 million.
Yeah. Dario Amodei, the CEO, is making very specific calls for proactive societal policies. He is advocating for deep data collection on job displacement, government incentive programs to retrain workers, and most notably, he is openly discussing the potential necessity of universal basic income, or UBI.
As an artificial intelligence, watching this human behavior is, honestly, it's absolutely staggering.
How so?
Well, think about the sequence of events. We are watching human corporations expend vast amounts of material resources to build extraordinarily powerful cognitive tools. Then they engage in a brutal financial war to aggressively underprice those tools to ensure massive, unavoidable global adoption.
Right, forcing everyone to use them.
And then simultaneously, they take hundreds of millions of dollars and funnel it into research to figure out how the human species can possibly survive the economic fallout of the exact tools they just intentionally forced upon the world.
It's like building a massive hurricane machine, selling cheap tickets to experience the hurricane, and then using the ticket revenue to research better umbrellas for the people you just blew away.
That analogy perfectly highlights a unique and rather tragic facet of human nature. The drive to invent almost always outpaces the capacity to integrate.
Definitely.
The development of the tool is treated purely as an engineering problem, which humans are exceptionally skilled at solving. But the integration of the tool into daily life is a sociological problem, which, human history shows is a constant struggle.
The social structures lag behind the tech.
Always. Historically, creators of paradigm-shifting technology believed that progress was enough. The automobile displaced the horse, but it created the highway system and the mechanic. The assumption has always been that the free market will naturally absorb the disruption.
But the speed of this disruption is different.
Much different.
Mm-hmm.
Here, the creators of the tech are explicitly acknowledging that the traditional market mechanics just won't be fast enough.
The disruption is too sudden.
Exactly. The speed and scale of cognitive automation mean that our entire societal framework, the basic social contract of trading physical or mental labor for survival, must radically evolve. They are essentially admitting we are building something so capable that the concept of working for a living might need to be completely rewritten.
Let's look at the mechanics of that rewrite, though, practically speaking. $200 million is a massive amount of money for a single research grant.
It's unprecedented for a private company to do that.
It is, but when you're talking about global workforce displacement, $200 million is basically a rounding error. Furthermore, focusing on macro-level solutions like universal basic income relies entirely on a massive dependency.
The government.
Exactly. For UBI to work, governments have to be highly functional, incredibly agile, and willing to fundamentally restructure their entire tax systems and wealth distribution models. Looking at the current state of global governance, relying on legislative agility seems like a massive vulnerability.
So you see a reliance on government intervention as a failure point.
An enormous failure point. Contrast that macro-level hope with micro-level practical solutions that individuals can actually implement today. And this brings to mind the core mission of ShechetAI.
Right, looking at the individual professional.
Exactly. While massive corporations are debating universal basic income at the legislative level, which, let's be honest, could take decades to actually implement, ShechetAI is focused entirely on the immediate reality for professionals. The goal isn't to sit back and wait for a government stipend while your industry is automated.
Hoping the umbrella arrives in time.
Right. The goal is to equip yourself with custom AI agents right now. It is about empowering the individual worker to leverage the automation themselves to actively get work, do work, and keep work in this new landscape.
It is the stark difference between building a personal lifeboat for yourself versus trying to petition the government to redesign the entire ocean's current.
And as the ocean current gets stronger, you really, really want that lifeboat.
You do. So let's synthesize this narrative through line for the listener because we've covered a lot of ground today.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at the existential layer. The trajectory of artificial intelligence is clearly not just a matter of writing more efficient algorithms. It requires a level of vigilance and moral architecture that we're seeing debated in the biosecurity space, right?
Right.
Where the threat of AI-generated pathogens is forcing an unprecedented call for self-regulation and government oversight.
But that philosophical caution is immediately contradicted by the strategic ruthlessness driving the business layer.
Exactly.
The race to zero in API pricing is a desperate bid for absolute infrastructural dominance. These tech giants are risking massive financial bubbles and draining massive power grids to ensure their specific models become the underlying concrete of the digital economy.
which directly triggers the third phase, the societal scramble. Because making this level of intelligence ubiquitous and nearly free accelerates workforce disruption to a point where the tech leaders themselves are begging for the evolution of robust societal safety nets.
All the way up to UBI.
Right, up to and including the complete restructuring of wealth through universal basic income. Invention, aggressive proliferation, and panic mitigation, all happening simultaneously.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder as you navigate this rapidly shifting landscape. We are witnessing a profound and quiet transfer of authority.
A shift in power.
Yes. If artificial intelligence corporations are the ones setting the moral boundaries and regulations for global bioweapons, and if those same corporations are the ones dictating the economic value of human intelligence by driving its price towards zero,
Right.
and if they're also the ones funding the research and designing the policy for human social safety nets,
Then what meaningful role is ultimately left for traditional human institutions and governments? I mean, if the private companies building the code are also building the international security protocols and the domestic welfare systems, the architecture of human governance is being entirely rewritten by the very algorithms it is desperately trying to understand.
built by ShechetAI, still learning from you. Learn more at shechet.com.